The evening commute through the industrial outskirts of Lyon is a ballet of muted gray light and the rhythmic hum of distant machinery. You glance at the clock on your dashboard, another day dissolving into the familiar, predictable routine. For decades, this rhythm defined a nation, a promise etched into every factory gate and every well-maintained public park. French life flowed with a certain stately confidence, built on the bedrock of shared prosperity and state-guaranteed security. Your parents, perhaps your grandparents, knew a France where diligence meant upward mobility, where a good job meant a secure future, where the state was a benevolent architect of national well-being. They saw the grand boulevards, the thriving local markets, the palpable sense of collective pride. Now, as the glow of your phone illuminates headlines about sluggish growth and rising living costs, that once vibrant confidence feels like a faded photograph. The structures are still there, but the underlying pulse has weakened, a silent, pervasive shift. This isn't fiction. It's consequence. Before we delve deeper into this story, tell us, where are you watching from? Your perspective is part of this global conversation. You are about to uncover the invisible mechanics behind a profound transformation, not just in France, but in the very fabric of what we understand as modern prosperity. This isn't another exposé on political blunders or temporary recessions. Instead, we will meticulously dissect how a powerful nation, once a beacon of social progress and economic stability, inadvertently engineered its own stagnation. We'll reveal why the dreams of a secure middle-class life have become increasingly elusive, how the promise of meritocracy has fractured, and why the economic models we once lauded now choke the very growth they were meant to foster. Few dare to speak of this systemic truth, preferring to blame external forces or short-term cycles. But the story we're about to tell cuts much deeper, exposing the inevitable consequences of choices made decades ago. Choices that continue to echo through your daily life, shaping your future in ways you might not yet fully grasp. Prepare to see the world differently. Imagine a grand, intricate clockwork, meticulously assembled in the aftermath of a great upheaval. This was France after the Second World War, driven by an almost sacred mission to rebuild and secure its future. The state, rather than a distant entity, became the master craftsman, designing a society where collective well-being was paramount. You saw this in the vast network of public services, from world-class healthcare to accessible education, all underpinned by significant state ownership in strategic industries like energy and transport. It was a bold, ambitious vision, a powerful, centralized government acting as the guarantor of prosperity, protecting its citizens from the harsh winds of market volatility. This system wasn't just about economic policy. It was a profound social contract, a promise of stability and shared progress, where the individual thrived within a robust, protective national framework. High taxes were not merely an obligation. They were the price of this collective security, funding the safety nets that promised to catch everyone. If you find yourself questioning why certain truths remain unspoken, why complex issues often lack clear answers, then this channel is for you. Subscribe now and join us as we uncover the stories nobody fully explains. For decades, this intricate machinery operated with an almost hypnotic efficiency, cultivating a deep-seated belief that France had discovered a unique formula for perpetual prosperity. You were taught, implicitly and explicitly, that this model was not only viable but superior, a bulwark against the perceived excesses of unfettered capitalism. The implicit promise was clear: work diligently, contribute to society, and the state would ensure your quality of life, your job security, and your dignified retirement. It wasn't just an economic system. It was a cornerstone of national identity, a source of immense pride. The idea that this carefully constructed edifice might one day face fundamental challenges, that it might need to adapt drastically to a changing world, seemed almost heretical. This was the world Élodie Dubois was born into, a world where the foundations of society felt unshakable, where the future was a linear path of progress, paved by collective effort and guaranteed by the state. Now, meet Élodie Dubois. At 45, she embodies the very best of this French promise. Every morning, she navigates the same Lyon suburbs, heading to a small to medium enterprise. As a skilled engineer specializing in industrial automation, Élodie is not just an employee. She is a vital cog in France's once proud manufacturing engine, designing the precision components that fuel the European automotive supply chain. Her hands-on expertise, her meticulous attention to detail, and her innate problem-solving ability are the kind of skills that built nations. Élodie grew up in a comfortable middle-class home, the daughter of a public school teacher and a factory supervisor. Their lives were a testament to the system. Hard work, good education, and a steady career would reliably translate into a secure, upwardly mobile existence. She absorbed this lesson, internalizing the belief that diligent effort and specialized knowledge would always be rewarded. Élodie's professional pride is palpable. She thrives on the challenge of optimizing complex machinery, seeing her contribution as directly linked to France's industrial strength and global standing. Her values are those you likely recognize in yourself: a profound belief that competence should be rewarded, an unwavering desire to provide stability for her family, and the firm expectation that her chosen path, her specialized skills, and her relentless dedication would ensure a secure, prosperous future right there in France. She invested in her education, she paid her taxes, she played by the rules. For Élodie, and for many like you, this was more than a career. It was a life blueprint, a guaranteed trajectory. But what happens when that blueprint, once a symbol of unyielding strength, begins to show invisible cracks? What if the very foundations that promised security were, in fact, laying the groundwork for an entirely different, far more precarious reality? This is the question that France and Élodie would soon be forced to answer. The turning point wasn't a sudden cataclysm, but a quiet, almost imperceptible shift. A series of choices made by successive French governments from the late 1970s through the 1990s. As the world outside accelerated, embracing globalization with unbridled enthusiasm, France doubled down on its unique social contract. You might remember this era as one of profound conviction, the belief that the state, as the ultimate guarantor, could shield its citizens from the perceived harshness of market forces. These decisions were not seen as radical, quite the opposite. They felt like a natural evolution, a reaffirmation of the very values that had rebuilt the nation. The goal was noble: to expand and reinforce the extensive welfare state, to protect workers, and to ensure universal access to high-quality public services, preserving a distinct French identity in a rapidly converging world. At the moment, it seemed like the only rational, indeed, the most humane path forward. This path, prioritizing social protection and state intervention over significant market liberalization resonated deeply with a public still scarred by past economic volatilities and deeply invested in the promise of collective security. You were told, and you believed, that this robust model was France's strength, a shield against the perceived excesses of unfettered capitalism. Governments, reflecting this national sentiment, chose to uphold and expand public services, maintaining a firm hand in strategic industries and a comprehensive social safety net. It was a conscious decision to value solidarity and national sovereignty in economic planning above the perceived risks of open competition. This wasn't an act of neglect. It was a deliberate policy choice, seemingly prudent and forward-thinking, designed to safeguard a way of life that had delivered decades of stability and progress. The logic was clear: protect the people and the nation would thrive. Yet, beneath this veneer of stability, a structural error was slowly, silently taking root. Each decision, each reinforced layer of protection, each new regulation added a hidden weight to the system. What emerged was a gradual accumulation of rigidities. Increasingly high labor costs, driven by generous social charges, began to make French businesses less competitive on the global stage. Complex regulations and an ever-expanding tax burden started to act as disincentives for private investment and entrepreneurship. The state, in its benevolent role, found itself relying more and more on public debt to sustain the very system it had so carefully constructed. This wasn't a sudden collapse. It was a slow, almost imperceptible calcification, where the very mechanisms designed to ensure long-term prosperity began to subtly erode its foundations. The precise moment the system's logic began to falter wasn't marked by a single catastrophic event, but by the insidious creeping of cumulative costs. You see, the extensive model, with its ever higher taxes, intricate regulations, and mounting deficits, gradually started to stifle the very productivity, innovation, and industrial dynamism it needed to fund itself. The outward appearance of stability remained, but beneath the surface, the engine was losing power. France's once proud industrial base began a progressive decline, and the real purchasing power of its citizens, despite the promise, started to stagnate. This wasn't the result of external pressures alone. It was the internal weight of a system that had become too heavy, too inflexible, to adapt to a world that refused to stand still. If you find yourself reflecting on how seemingly correct decisions can lead to profound, unforeseen consequences over time, then you're beginning to grasp the core of this channel. Join our community by subscribing, and tell us in the comments, what seemingly logical decision in history do you believe had the most unexpected long-term impact? Your insights fuel this conversation. Elodie, in her daily routine, still believed in the system. She saw the headlines, heard the murmurs, but rationalized them as temporary market fluctuations, or perhaps the unavoidable growing pains of a complex economy. Yet, a subtle dissonance began to emerge in her professional life. Her company, a vital cog in the automotive supply chain, found itself struggling more than before. The once predictable contracts became harder to secure, and the margins tighter. Discussions about investing in new, cutting-edge automation technology, once a given, were now repeatedly postponed, caught in a web of budgetary constraints and escalating operational costs. She still poured her expertise into her work, but the direct, tangible rewards, the clear correlation between her effort and the company's robust growth, seemed less distinct, more elusive. The problem wasn't Elodie's skill or dedication. It was the tightening grip of the very structures designed to protect. Businesses across France, particularly SMEs like hers, found themselves caught between prohibitive labor costs and a labyrinthine regulatory environment. You watch as the once bustling factory floors, symbols of national pride, either scaled back production, relocated parts of their operations abroad, or simply vanished. Elodie's company, once resilient, now faced an uphill battle to compete internationally. The ability to invest in the next generation of machinery, to hire promising young engineers directly from university, was increasingly hampered by cumulative pressures, from energy costs to social contributions that made every new hire a significant financial gamble. The industrial dynamism was slowly being choked. As the years passed, Elodie's personal experience mirrored this broader, silent erosion. Her salary, once a clear indicator of upward mobility, now felt stagnant, barely keeping pace with the rising cost of living. The promise of a steadily improving quality of life, a core tenet of the French social contract, began to feel like a distant echo. She saw talented younger colleagues, the future of French engineering, making the difficult choice to emigrate, lured by better prospects and lower tax burdens in Germany, the UK, or even further afield. This wasn't just a brain drain. It was a profound questioning of the system Elodie had so faithfully served. The belief that diligent effort and specialized knowledge would guarantee a secure, prosperous future in France was dissolving into a gnawing anxiety. The tension grew not from a sudden crisis, but from the slow, undeniable realization that the problem was no longer a temporary blip on the economic radar. This wasn't a cyclical downturn, it was a structural misalignment, a fundamental flaw in the grand design. The system, once a benevolent architect of national well-being, now seemed to be punishing its most loyal citizens, those who had played by the rules and contributed diligently. The promise of meritocracy, the bedrock of Elodie's professional pride, was fracturing. You witness the growing chasm between the stable, prosperous future she was promised and the increasingly precarious reality she now navigated. A stark betrayal of the foundational principles she had always believed in. The silent rupture was now audible, if only to those truly listening. The intricate machinery of France, once hailed for its social protection, began its silent descent into dysfunction through a seemingly benevolent mechanism: high social charges. Designed with the best intentions to fund an expansive welfare state and ensure comprehensive social cohesion, these charges became an ever-increasing burden on labor costs for every business operating within the nation's borders. You see, what felt like an indispensable safety net for workers simultaneously became a lead weight for employers attempting to navigate an increasingly cutthroat global marketplace. French companies, particularly those striving to compete in international trade, found themselves at a profound and growing disadvantage. Their products, intrinsically tied to the escalating cost of their workforce, simply could not compete on price or flexibility with international rivals operating under less restrictive labor frameworks. This wasn't an act of malice or oversight. It was the inevitable yet unintended consequence of a system that, in its unwavering commitment to social provision, slowly began to strangle the very competitiveness it needed to sustain itself. What was once France's strategic advantage, a powerful state-led industrial policy that cultivated national champions and directed economic growth, gradually transformed into a profound vulnerability. The very hands that had guided reconstruction and fostered initial successes became less agile, less adaptable to the dizzying pace of global technological shifts. As the world moved at lightning speed, embracing digital revolutions and new manufacturing paradigms, France's centralized intervention often lagged, hampered by bureaucratic inertia and a reluctance to cede control. This created a stifling environment for private sector innovation. Companies like Elodie's, eager to invest in cutting-edge automation, found themselves caught in a system where the state, rather than facilitating rapid adaptation, inadvertently created barriers, leading to a palpable decline in productivity growth and a weakening of the nation's industrial muscle. The unwavering pursuit of social stability, admirable in its intent, became increasingly unsustainable. Extensive public spending and high taxation, meticulously designed to fund the vast welfare state, were not matched by corresponding productivity gains or economic dynamism. This fundamental imbalance inevitably led to chronic budget deficits year after year, transforming what might have been temporary shortfalls into a ballooning national debt. You understand how this works. To sustain the system, the state was forced into a perpetual cycle of further taxation or increased borrowing. This vicious cycle, while seemingly abstract, had very real consequences. It systematically crowded out private investment, making it harder for businesses to grow, and directly reduced the real purchasing power for diligent citizens like Elodie, slowly eroding the very stability and prosperity it had initially promised to protect. As these cumulative pressures mounted, prohibitive labor costs, rigid regulations, and a stifling tax burden, French businesses faced an impossible choice. Many, unable to compete on a global playing field, either made the painful decision to relocate parts of their production abroad, seeking more favorable operating environments, or simply struggled to remain viable, eventually closing their doors. This exodus resulted in a progressive deindustrialization of France, a visible unraveling of its manufacturing base, and a tragic wave of job losses across countless communities. Elodie's company, once a robust symbol of national engineering, found itself ensnared in this tightening web. Investing in new, essential machinery or hiring promising young talent became an increasingly difficult gamble, directly impacting her career progression and income prospects as the very foundation of her industry weakened. This wasn't Elodie's fault. She had meticulously done everything right, excelled in her education, embraced a demanding technical career, and consistently contributed to society through her work and taxes. Yet, a growing frustration now gnawed at her, a profound sense of betrayal. Her salary, once a clear path to upward mobility, felt stubbornly stagnant, barely keeping pace with the relentless rise in the cost of living. The once predictable trajectory of her life, the stable, prosperous future she had been promised, was dissolving into an increasingly precarious reality. She watched, bewildered, as equally talented younger colleagues, the future of French engineering, made the difficult, heart-wrenching choice to emigrate, seeking better prospects abroad. The chasm between the fundamental principles she believed in and the harsh daily economic struggles she faced was widening, shattering her belief that merit and effort would guarantee a secure future in her own country. If you find yourself connecting with Elodie's story, if you recognize the frustration of a system that no longer seems to reward effort, then you're beginning to understand the deeper forces at play. This kind of unflinching analysis, revealing the hidden mechanics of global change, is what we do here. Subscribe to our channel now, and join a community that dares to ask the difficult questions and seeks profound, actionable answers. We're just getting started. The true antagonists in this unfolding drama were not individual villains, but rather the very systems designed to protect. France's onerous labor laws, while noble in their intent to shield workers, had inadvertently created a web of rigidities that actively disincentivized hiring. Businesses, facing immense costs for even a single employee, became hesitant to expand, preferring to outsource or delay growth. Simultaneously, an excessive bureaucracy and labyrinthine regulatory environment imposed an unbearable administrative burden. From navigating complex permits to complying with endless reporting requirements, every enterprise, from burgeoning startups to established industries like Elodies, found innovation stifled, investment delayed, and significant costs added to every single operation. These structural forces, operating with the cold logic of an indifferent machine, progressively undermined the nation's economic vitality. Compounding these internal pressures were the actions of a political elite often perceived as profoundly disconnected from the ground-level economic realities faced by ordinary citizens and the SMEs that formed the backbone of the economy. These decision-makers frequently prioritized ideological consistency and maintaining social consensus over the pragmatic, growth-oriented economic reforms desperately needed. This reluctance to adapt was further exacerbated by France's asymmetrical financial systems. A persistent, almost institutional reliance on public debt to fund the expansive welfare state created a long-term fiscal burden of staggering proportions. This debt didn't just sit idly. It actively crowded out private investment, diverting capital that could have fueled innovation and job creation, instead exacerbating the nation's economic fragility and making every new challenge harder to overcome. Finally, external dependencies tightened the noose. The constraints of Eurozone integration, while bringing undeniable benefits, simultaneously limited France's monetary policy flexibility. No longer able to devalue its currency to gain a competitive edge, its less competitive economic model was exposed to direct, unflattering comparison and intense pressure from more fiscally disciplined partners like Germany. Beyond this, a growing reliance on imported energy and crucial raw materials left the nation acutely vulnerable to global shocks and price volatility. These external forces, interacting with the internal rigidities, created a perfect storm, intensifying the struggle for businesses and individuals alike. The global stage was unforgiving, and France, by clinging to its past, found itself increasingly out of step. The irreversible turning point was not a single dramatic event, but a consistent, almost generational political decision, the repeated deferral of fundamental structural reforms. Across multiple administrations, from the late 1980s through the early 2000s, France chose to postpone crucial changes to its labor market, public spending, and tax system. This occurred precisely when global competition intensified dramatically, and Eurozone integration imposed new, unavoidable fiscal discipline, rendering the existing model demonstrably unsustainable. A pivotal moment was the collective failure to significantly reduce the state's pervasive weight in the economy, or to genuinely liberalize key sectors, even as evidence mounted that Germany and other European partners were successfully adapting their models, forging new paths to prosperity. This was not an oversight. It was a choice, driven by a powerful cocktail of fear of social unrest, political expediency, a deeply ingrained belief in the French statist model, and formidable resistance from vested interests. The lost opportunity cost was immense. France sacrificed decades of potential productivity growth, forwent countless private sector job creations, and, critically, lost the ability to adapt its industrial base to the burgeoning demands of the 21st century. From this point onward, the options for recovery became severely limited. The national debt had swelled to substantial proportions, the industrial base significantly eroded, and any reform, however necessary, now carried a far higher social and political cost, making the path to genuine recovery agonizingly arduous and politically perilous. The future had irrevocably narrowed. The structural flaws we have meticulously uncovered are not merely theoretical constructs or academic debates. Their stark reality is etched into the very economic landscape of France. You see it in the undeniable, consistent decline of the nation's share in global industrial production, a metric that once proudly showcased its manufacturing prowess. This isn't just a statistic, it's the visible exodus of once iconic companies, the poignant example of Alstom's energy division, a cornerstone of French engineering, being acquired by General Electric, a stark symbol of a nation ceding its industrial sovereignty. Furthermore, the closure of countless manufacturing plants, once vibrant hubs of employment and innovation, now stand as silent, rusting monuments to a system that, despite its best intentions, simply could not keep pace. These aren't isolated incidents. They are the cumulative, verifiable consequences of a long-term structural misalignment, confirming that the economic weakening was not accidental, but logically inevitable. This industrial decay is compounded by a far more insidious loss, the flight of future potential. You might observe a growing number of promising French startups, brimming with innovation and entrepreneurial spirit, making the difficult but pragmatic decision to scale their operations not within France, but abroad, actively seeking more favorable business environments unburdened by the nation's unique rigidities. This trend is not confined to capital. It manifests profoundly as a noticeable brain drain. Highly skilled young French professionals, much like Elodie's own former colleagues, individuals educated by the very system now struggling, are increasingly choosing to emigrate to countries like Germany, the UK, or the United States. They are driven by the pursuit of better career prospects, lower tax burdens, and a clearer path to upward mobility, leaving behind a crucial void in France's future economic capacity. For those who remain, the economic realities paint an equally stark picture, validating the systemic erosion of prosperity. France has endured stagnant real wages for its middle class over the last 2 decades. A cruel irony given the initial promise of a steadily improving quality of life for diligent workers. You witness a consistently higher unemployment rate compared to its European peers, a particularly devastating reality for its youth, who face immense hurdles entering a job market choked by structural rigidities. This isn't just about individual hardship. It reflects a profound national struggle, evidenced by France's declining ranking in global competitiveness indices year after year. The nation, once a leader in economic and social progress, now finds itself struggling to keep pace, a direct consequence of an inward-looking model that failed to adapt to the relentless currents of global change. These are not temporary setbacks. They represent irreversible changes that have fundamentally reshaped the nation. You are witnessing the permanent shift of significant parts of France's manufacturing base to Eastern Europe or Asia, transforming what was once a cornerstone of national pride into a structural dependency on imports for key goods. This has led to a lasting reduction in industrial employment, fundamentally altering the fabric of French society and its long-term economic potential. The vision of a self-sufficient, industrially robust France, once a guiding star, has faded, replaced by a new reality where the nation's capacity to produce, innovate, and provide high-value jobs for its citizens has been critically diminished. The consequences are not just economic, they are deeply societal, reshaping the identity and prospects of an entire nation. The evidence is undeniable, and the implications are profound. If you seek to understand not just what is happening, but why, and how these structural shifts will continue to unfold across the global stage, then you need to be part of this conversation. Subscribe to our channel now. We are committed to meticulously analyzing these complex interconnected developments, explaining the invisible mechanics that shape our world, and connecting the dots between seemingly disparate events. Join us as we continue to track the next crucial chapters of this story and others like it, preparing you for the transformations yet to come. If this trajectory remains unaddressed, France faces profound systemic consequences that will ripple across generations. You must understand that future generations will inevitably be burdened by significantly higher taxes, a direct legacy of the accumulated public debt, and the ongoing struggle to fund an unsustainable welfare state. This will be coupled with a grim reality of reduced public services, as the nation's capacity to invest in critical infrastructure, education, and healthcare diminishes. They will face limited job opportunities in high-value sectors, struggling constantly for upward mobility in an economy that offers fewer pathways to prosperity. This bleak outlook will inevitably lead to increased intergenerational resentment and a growing social fragmentation, as the once unified social contract begins to unravel under the weight of its own structural contradictions. Globally, France will experience a gradual but undeniable decline in its economic and political influence, both within the European Union and on the wider world stage. As its economic engine sputters, its capacity to project power, to shape policy, and to lead on critical international issues will diminish. This isn't merely a loss of prestige, it's a tangible loss of relevance, characterized by a reduced capacity for innovation that once fueled its progress, and a shrinking share in critical global industries that define the future. The nation will find itself increasingly reliant on its historical brand, its cultural heritage, rather than current economic dynamism, a poignant retreat from the front lines of global competition, impacting its voice and its leverage in an ever more interconnected and demanding world. The cherished welfare state itself, once a source of immense national pride and the bedrock of social stability, will become increasingly unsustainable. You will witness the painful reality of difficult and politically contentious choices. Further cuts to essential services, even higher taxes imposed on an already strained populace, or an unsustainable escalation of national debt that only delays the inevitable. This is a cruel paradox, where the very system designed to protect its citizens ultimately begins to demand more than it can realistically provide, eroding the fundamental social contract between the state and its people. This erosion carries with it the very real potential for greater social unrest, as citizens like Elodie, who played by the rules, find their expectations fundamentally betrayed. France's economic trajectory, therefore, serves as a potent and universal cautionary tale. You see how even a nation with rich history and robust institutions can, through a persistent inability to adapt its foundational economic model to evolving global realities, inadvertently undermine its own prosperity and long-term stability. This narrative reveals a critical pattern. Policies initially designed for social cohesion can, if rigidly maintained, become the very source of systemic fragility and decline. The illusion of perpetual stability, often fueled by past successes and a reluctance to confront uncomfortable truths, inevitably leads to a widening chasm between perceived national wealth and the lived economic reality of its citizens. Understanding France's predicament is not merely about a single country. It is about grasping the profound, often hidden structural forces that shape our collective future. Unaddressed fragilities in one interconnected world can have ripple effects far beyond its borders, impacting the stability and prosperity of all. The systems we choose to uphold today are the architects of our inescapable tomorrow.